Hello everyone, and welcome to Fertile Ground with Mike and Coach. My name is Mike Cornell, and I'm alongside Coach Ron Lathey. When you think of the word love, what comes to your mind first? Well, the world has its definition of what love is, and the Bible has its definition of what love is. And today's segment is going to take a good close look at that, at what the differences are. And today, we want you to think about and to consider three things as we get started. And the first one is this: what enables a Christian to love? And this is a really good spot for your note taker to grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, grab your Bible, and follow right along with us here today. Second of all, who should you love more, your neighbor or yourself? And that could be a loaded question, Coach. We have to be careful with that one.
Yeah.
And then finally, what does it mean to put childish things behind us? And today, we continue with the International Sunday School series. And Coach, here we go. Last week, the title of our study was Freedom from Expectations. This week, the title of our study is Freedom to Love. And we're going to be in the book of Romans. We're going to be looking at chapter 13, verses 8 through 10. And then we're going to jump over to 1 Corinthians. And we're going to be in chapter 13 there as well. But we're going to be looking at verses 8 through 13. And Coach, could you get us started with some prayer and just kind of set the stage for today's lesson?
Sure. Let us pray. Most kind and loving Heavenly Father, again, we humbly come before you, Lord. First of all, just saying thank you for being the kind of God that you are. Lord, as we look into what some people call the love chapter today, we are so thankful for the love that you show us each and every day. Lord, just all the things that you do for us that we take for granted, all the things that we can count on you for. But most of all, Lord, it goes all the way back to sending your Son to die for us on a cross while we were yet sinners. And Lord, just the love that you had to show for us to give up your only Son and put him through such turmoil and such a terrible death. Goes to show just how much you do love us. Lord, just forgive us when we are not loving back. Forgive us when we don't show the love to others that you want us to show. We are weak in many ways, but Lord, again, we always have your shining example to see and follow as we go through our own lives. And Lord, again, just be with those that are hurting today. There's people that are I'm sure sick physically, people that are spiritually sick, emotionally sick, and Lord, you know each situation. And I would just ask, Lord, that you would love them in a way that they know you're still in charge, that you still have things under control. Now go with us as we open your word and give us the words you want us to say and make them clear to those that are listening to us. This we ask in your Son's precious and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Yeah, Mike, as you said, we're going to be looking at a couple books of Paul's tonight and or today, and beginning with Romans, chapter 13 of Romans, Paul talks about love. And of course, when we go to 1 Corinthians, chapter 13, as I said, that's what a lot of people call the love chapter,
right? Because
of the way that Paul, the many things that he's written in it. And we know that the idea of love is really being mixed up and confusing. It's really tough, as most people know. I teach young kids, high school age kids, and believe me, their idea of love is a whole lot different than it was when you and I were growing up. So and the world has just taken the idea of God's love and totally gotten rid of it in every place that they can. So those kids don't have in a lot of cases, an example to follow. And one of the things that we realize we'll talk about today is how God showed his love to us through sending his Son, and then his Son showing the kind of love that a Christian should have for one another and for people. So through those examples, we hope people can get an idea that the real kind of love only begins with Jesus Christ.
Right.
And that's where it has to begin. And, Jesus told his disciples, and it was recorded in John chapter 13, a new commandment I give you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. So for Christians out there, this is how people are supposed to know we're Christians.
Right.
This is kind of our telltale sign. If we love one another and love people that maybe sometimes are kind of hard to love, but that's how God says that we know, and He knows that we are His children. So that's the kind of thing we're going to look at today too. What does it mean to be a Christian, and what's Christian love? And then at the same time, how do we show that to the world so they understand what love is?
Yeah, a lot of times, Coach, you find these passages that we're looking at here today wrapped around February the 14th.
Yeah.
From a pastor or a teacher. A lot of times they associate it with Valentine's Day. And they take that opportunity to really share the difference of what the difference is between what the world's view of love is and what God's view of love is. And we'll go ahead and get started here. And we're going to see here in the very first couple verses in Romans 13, 8 through 10, we're going to see that love fulfills the law. And we've been talking about the law quite a bit here in the last several weeks. And that takes us to our first verse, Romans chapter 13, verse 8. And God's word says this: let no debt remain outstanding, except the continuing debt to love one another, for whoever loves others has fulfilled the law. And basically, kind of what Paul's saying right here, Coach, is if you've borrowed your neighbor's lawnmower, take it back.
Yeah, and he's warning, I think, although it doesn't always hang on, if you borrow somebody's money from somebody, that you make sure you put that back, but you're certainly supposed to do that. And, we think about we see things in the news all the time about our country's debt.
Yep.
And we know that there's all kinds of people that are in problems with debt right now because of credit card debt and loans that they have taken out and so forth. But we are obligated as Christians. If you owe somebody something, you are to pay it back. Whether you borrowed it, whether you, like I said, had a loan or whatever. Christians are expected to pay their debts
on time.
On time, that's yes. Right, and pay back fully. Because it's not only our reputation online, but it's God's reputation online. Because Christians are looked at by others that are non-Christians as supposed to be upright and with everything they do. So it's a way, kind of a test that we pay everything back and return things that so people can see that we truly are. We live what we preach. Yeah. In that way. So, but here we need to say that this is let no debt remain outstanding except one, and it's the one we're going to talk about today. There's one debt that we owe. Paul is going to tell us, and the scriptures tell us, and that's the debt of love.
Right.
And I don't care how much you've loved and you are loving, and you never get done, is what our lesson is going to remind us. No matter how much love you show to other people, you can never look at someone and say, "Okay, I've loved you enough." I'm going to quit for a while. So
although there are some that you would like to say that to.
Yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to go on. But of course, Paul then, in several instances, has mentioned the fact that even in Galatians 5:14, we saw the entire law is fulfilled by keeping this one command, basically. And that's, whoever loves, it says here, others, has fulfilled the law.
Right.
And the kind of, we'll talk about that as we go, but if you are truly loving people, you're not going to be doing things that the law told you not to do.
Yeah. If you're a born again believing Christian, you've accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, Coach, you will always have a debt of love to your neighbor.
Right.
And that doesn't necessarily mean the man next door. It it depends on who you see as your neighbor, and the Bible's really clear about who your neighbor is.
Right.
It literally is everybody you come in contact with. It's not necessarily other Christians. It's not necessarily the man next door.
Right.
It's literally anybody that you come in contact with. That's who the Bible really defines as your neighbor. And this giving of love that we're going to talk about, and we're starting to right now, really fulfills three purposes, Coach. First of all, it blesses the person who receives the love.
Right.
When you think about that, many people are desperately in need of a kind word or a small demonstration that somebody actually cares about them.
Right.
This world is starving for that. There are people absolutely do not get any of that. And if you just show them a little bit, all of a sudden they start seeing Jesus through you. The second thing is the Christian who shows love for his or her neighbor becomes a powerful witness.
Right.
That's what happens when you show that love. And then third of all, as Paul states, love actually fulfills the law.
Right.
And that's really what verse 8 is ending with here.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that he says that is that in the kind of love that we're talking about today is not the kind of love between a man and a wife. That's not what we're talking about necessarily, but it's between neighbors and friends, and it's normally the love is shown by going out of your way.
Yeah.
You make extra effort to make that person feel special, or feel like that, as you said, they are worth something to you, and just feel like that you are their friends, and you go out of your way to show those things.
Yep. All right, and that takes us to that first question that we talked about earlier, and what enables a Christian to love? And there should be born-again believers all over listening or watching us here today. And I think it's important for them to understand what is enabling them to show Christian love.
Yeah, because first and foremost, you cannot really show the kind of love that God wants you to show if you don't know personally the love that He showed you.
Right.
Meaning that you don't know the love of Jesus Christ. And so the first thing is you've got to get your life, in line with God's purpose for you and in line with what Christ did, and really take time to make it personal. Realize that Christ died for you, and He would have done that if you'd have been the only one that needed it.
That's right.
Yeah, He loves us that much. And the world doesn't understand that kind of love. And for us to be able to show that kind of love, we have to know what that love is like. So that's the first thing I would say. And then at the same time, we have to realize that love is going to cost us something. We have to be willing to, like I said, give of ourselves in a way that sometimes takes away from what we would like to do. And also we got to realize that we're going to be asked to love sometimes the unlovable, or the ones that extra grace is required,
AGR.
Yeah, EGR, extra grace required. But we're called to love everybody, as a neighbor and as a friend. So that's not easy what we're talking about here, but, the Christian has not only the help of knowing what Christ did for the person, but it also enables us with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit guides us and helps us maybe keep our emotions under control. So when people do something maybe that makes us angry, we can overlook that and move ahead. Again, to continue to know they're still our neighbor. We still need to try to mend fences, as we say. So. It's that kind of help basically from the fact of knowing Christ and then having the Holy Spirit that enables us to love the way that God wants us to love.
Yeah, that's a good description of that. And really, we can't understand what love is until we've experienced God's grace and mercy through His love.
Right.
And that's where it all really begins. We can't even begin to love ourselves, first of all, until we've experienced that, let alone other people.
Right.
And Christianity is not just about a belief in God, but also about living a life that reflects His love. That's our job. This love that enables us to love as a Christian, we're to reflect that, because that's just God's love.
Right.
It's just passing through us. And at its core, well, first of all, God's love for us is selfless. And that's how our love is to be too. At its core, true Christian love is based on selflessness. And it's not about what we can gain or receive, but rather what we can give to others and not expect anything in return.
Right.
That's what I mean by selflessness. God's love is forgiving. And that's the way the Christian is to reflect God's love. One key aspect of true Christian love is forgiveness. As Christians, it's important that we forgive those who have wronged us as Christ forgave us when He died on the cross for our sins. And that means even forgiving them when they aren't really forgivable, like you were talking about a minute ago. Sacrificial giving. When we consider the love that God has for us through His sacrificial giving, it should inspire and motivate us to do the same for our brothers and sisters, and not just our brothers and sisters, but all the people around us, our neighbor, as we talked about earlier. Showing compassion is another one. God does that with us. Loving our neighbors as ourselves. And we'll talk more about that here in a little bit. But sacrificing our own desires, extending grace and forgiveness even when it's not deserved. That all of those things are examples and characters of God's love. And that's the only way that we can be enabled to show Christian love to those around us. And that takes us to verse 9. And it says, the commandments: you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and whatever other command there may be, are summed up in this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. So Paul has written in the previous verse that the person who loves another has fulfilled the law. Now he begins to explain what he meant by that statement. Yeah,
he actually goes back to Exodus and pulls out the Ten Commandments, part of the Ten Commandments, literally. And he mentions here 4 of them together, and then goes on to mention even another one. And these are ones that we know we find in the commandments. And what he's saying here is those commandments that he mentioned there are the ones basically tell you this is what you're not to do if you are following God's law and so forth. So he's saying you don't commit adultery, you don't murder, you don't steal, you don't covet. These are all things that would be major sins if you ask anybody about them. And so I think he brings the major ones out first, because when he says love fulfills this law, he's saying that when you have the kind of love that God gives us, if you can express that to other people, you won't have to worry about any of those things. You wouldn't think of doing those kind of things to hurt someone in any way, and that way that part of the law is taken care of. And that's how love can actually fulfill the law, and that's that goes back to even what Jesus would tell them. When he was asked what's the greatest commandment, and he said there's 2. He said you love God, you love people. And he said, and then he went on to say that the entirety of the law is focused on those 2. If you can do those 2 things, love God and love people, everything else will fall into place for you.
Yeah, all of it's covered.
That's right, and that's where Paul's trying to come into these people and let them know that the love will take care of all these things, and that's why what he's preaching about the law really doesn't apply to you if you're a Christian anymore. And which we've been talking about for weeks now, that the law is not what you're basing your salvation on. Then now that takes out and shows them, because love will cover all that.
Right. It's interesting here too, because Paul, in typical Paul fashion, he's speaking in terms that his listeners can relate to. So you look at it, Romans is who this is actually written for. They live in a culture that's different than everywhere else in the world. It's a very close quarter culture. They live in very close proximity to each other. So you take the commandments that he plucked out of the 10 Commandments, those are the ones that were most prevalent in that culture.
Right.
So the ones that they could most relate to here, which I thought was really, really interesting. But so he makes it clear still, when we are acting in love, we will never hurt anyone. Thus, love fulfills the intention of what he's talking about here. And when Paul says that we should love our neighbors as ourselves, he is not commanding self-love, but is acknowledging that we tend to love ourselves in a way that we look after our best interest. And he's not saying that's wrong.
Right.
He's just saying you should love your neighbor the same way. So that's kind of what he's saying here.
Right, and he also saying too that our love for our neighbor is revealed more in what we do than what we say.
Yeah.
That's the idea too. You have to show that love. That's not a something that you can just talk about kind of love. This is the kind that, as we talked about often, you have to go out of your own way to show that.
And you can't help to think, there was a lawyer that tried to test Jesus as to who is his neighbor, and he was hoping to trip him up with the answer. And when a lawyer seeking to test Jesus asked, "And who is my neighbor?" And that's actually in Luke chapter 10, verse 29. Right. Jesus replied with the parable of the Good Samaritan, if you remember, Coach, saying in effect that every person whom we encounter is our neighbor. And if every Christian, every born-again believer would approach every single day in that manner, think about how much more powerful the gospel would be.
Right, and I've said this several times, and people may have heard it before, but if you stop and think that if you are a Christian and you're looking for someone to help out of love, the ultimate love that you can show is leading somebody to Christ.
Yeah.
And the thing that happens is God will put certain people in your pathway if you're really looking for them. And in many times, that person that he puts in your life or your pathway you are the only one that person will listen to.
All right.
And if you don't try to show them Christ, they may miss their chance for eternal life. And so all of it just works so good together, but it all stems from love.
Yeah. All right, let's go to verse 10. It says, "Love does no harm to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfillment of the law." So love never seeks to harm another. Rather, it actively seeks for the best welfare and honor for everybody, Coach.
Right, and that's kind of what we've already alluded to a couple times. The fact that that's why the law is fulfilled by this is because you will not do those kind of things that Paul mentioned to anyone if you really love them. You're not going to hurt them in any way, and that's what a lot of the law would say: "Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that." And so in many ways, this love is saying that just because of love, you would not do that. And it becomes to where you don't have to worry about keeping the law because it's done almost, by just simply following what God calls you to do. It takes care of itself. In other words, you don't have to worry about all those rules and regulations, trying to follow them and so forth. You're just going to do it naturally.
Yeah, and I think this is probably a really good spot right here too, Coach, to look at the distinct difference between the love that we're talking about here and the love that the world sees. Mm-hmm. Because the love, if you look at this verse and you go and you translate it back to the original language, the intent of it actually is talking about agape love, mm-hmm. which is a true intimate love that flows from God himself.
Right.
And that's what we're to reflect. So here it's not talking about a brotherly love, which there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. It's not talking about a romantic love. There's nothing wrong with that. It's talking about a true, authentic, intimate love that flows directly from God and actually flows through the believer to our neighbor.
Right.
That's what this is really talking about
Right.
here. And that takes us to our second question of the evening, and that is, who should you love more, your neighbor or yourself? You go first.
Well, there are not too many people that I've run into lately that I think needs to love themselves more. There seems to be plenty of love to go around for ourselves, and and I mean that has its place, obviously, because we do have to feel like that every person needs to feel love, but in loving ourselves, if you're Christian, we know that our love comes from the love we get from God and we feel from Him. So we're going to be okay with ourselves. But what we see out there in the world now is everybody's in love with themselves, and they don't care about, a lot of times, that they could care less about anybody else they're around. They just want to take care of number one, and that's what we see out there. But the idea, obviously, here is that for what Jesus is telling us is the fact that we should be concerned about loving other people, because, again, the greatest love we can show them is leading them to Christ.
Yep.
And you're not going to do that if you keep the love for yourself. So the idea here is, as you mentioned, the light that God puts into us through His love should emanate out from us to other people. Yep. And that should be the love that we show to them, which, loving yourself is not something that comes that you even should be thinking about, because if you're a Christian, you're loved.
Right.
You don't have to worry about that. God loves you, So obviously my answer is that we're going to love others more than we do ourselves.
Well, if you look at this, Coach, it really, and we've talked about this before, it's really about peace, because peace is love. I mean, they're kind of synonymous when you think about it. If you have peace with God, you're going to have peace and love for yourself, and you're going to have peace and love for others. And the only way that you can have peace with God is to be one of His children,
Right.
and to have accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. So if you have done that, all of a sudden now you have peace with God. You're going to have peace with yourself. So you're going to be able to love yourself the way the Bible intended you to love yourself,
Right.
not in an unhealthy way.
Right.
Because each person was created by God Himself in a very special, unique way. That makes every person lovable. So we should be able to love ourselves, not in a prideful way that the world teaches us.
Yeah.
So once you can have peace with God and peace with yourself and have the love balanced out like that, then the love that you show your neighbor, those around you, is a natural conclusion.
Right.
It just occurs.
Right. And the idea, one of the things that I see that comes to me a lot is the idea, especially dealing with teenagers, is the idea of self-worth. We talk to them. Teenagers need to have self-worth,
Yep.
and for them to get that, oftentimes they don't have it because they don't know Christ, and they don't know what true love is, and they don't know what even what it's like to be loved in many cases. So the self-worth that they're dying for, that they would just give anything for, they don't know where to find it.
Yeah.
And so that's where sometimes they get caught up in loving themselves too much, and it leads to destruction.
There are a lot of pastors today and a lot of teachers that have a thread of legalism in their makeup. And they tend to skip over the piece here of actually loving yourself.
Yeah.
And that's wrong.
Right.
Because we are God's creation. We should love ourselves, but we shouldn't love ourselves in an unhealthy way.
Right. And you should be more satisfied,
Yep.
with where you are and who you are.
Yep.
And that only comes through the Holy Spirit.
Right. All right. That takes us to our next section here, and we're going to skip over now into the book of 1 Corinthians, looking at chapter 13. In verses 8 through 12, we're going to talk about a love that never fails.
Right.
And now this can't get old talking about this, Coach. It's really good stuff. In verse 8 says this, love never fails, but where there are prophecies, they will cease. Where there are tongues, they will be stilled. Where there is knowledge, it will pass away. So this thought of love that never fails, this agape love that we've been talking about, is front and center here in verse 8.
Right, yeah. And love never fails. The kind of love that we're talking about never fails. The kind of love that the world offers we can say is destructive in many ways. But the thing people needs to realize here is we're in Corinthians now, and you see here Paul mentioning some things, like he mentions the gift of tongues and the gift of prophecy. These are spiritual gifts that were given to people at that time by God and through the Holy Spirit. And what was happening in this place of Corinth, the church there, these gifts were actually being misused. Yeah. And where people, and we see this even today. But when you start talking about being able to, people say, well, you've got to be able to talk in tongues to speak to the Holy Spirit. You've got to be able to talk in tongues or you're not saved. And that causes a lot of confusion, what they mean by that. And a lot of people, there's a lot of disagreement about what that means among church members and church denominations. But that, and then of course being able to prophesy, this is not doing what we did and take people through the book of Revelation. This is when God gives someone a future event that's going to happen, right, and tells them to tell the people. Yep. That's the prophecies that we're talking about here. But the point that he's making, those at that time were becoming a prideful problem, because people that said they could talk in tongues and people that could prophesy, they were using that to build themselves up and become the idea of, well, because you can't do those two things and I can, I'm holier than you are, or I'm a better Christian than you are. And it was becoming a real problem in the church. So Paul's making a statement here that, going back to the very first verse we talked about, where we have a debt of love that never ends. He says that love there is continuing forever. As long as you're drawing breath, you should be loving others. And he's saying that these things like prophecies and the other spiritual gifts that are mentioned, he says one of these days they're not going to be here anymore.
Not needed.
Not needed. And then where are you going to be? It doesn't mean anything to be able to do those things. He's saying you're making a big deal out of things that are not that important. Yeah. Or it won't be that important later on, especially. So he's trying to tell them that all those other things will pass away, but love will always be there, because that's the eternal debt that you owe. And that's why it will never go away, no matter what happens.
Let's look just a little deeper into what God's love looks like, because a lot of people try to attach emotions to the love that we're talking about here, and that's not what it is at all. And probably one of the greatest examples, Coach, of God's love is his relationship with his covenant people, Israel. Mm-hmm. And you think about that for a minute. Time and time again, those people failed to be faithful. And time again, God punished them. Mm-hmm. That's God's love. Right. And people forget that part. It's like a parent.
That's the discipline.
In a child. Yeah, right. That's love.
Right.
And that's what I mean. It's not emotional. God's agape love is so intimate. It's amazing. And so those punishments, however, were redemptive rather than destructive. God didn't punish them to destroy them. He punished them to bring them back to himself. That's the difference.
Right.
God allowed the Israelites to suffer for all their sins, but God always provided a way back from their suffering. The same as a parent does a child, a good parent does a child. He redeemed them time and time again, and that should serve as a perfect model for us. As we try to be a reflection of God's love, we should try to do it in that manner too. it's not all warm and fuzzy and emotional and all that.
No.
There's a lot more to this love, and we need to maintain a loving spirit that acts to redeem those who fail us. And again, if you always look at the goal of anything that God does, it's always restoration.
Right.
That's always the goal.
And the other thing kind of going on from that is no matter what you have done in your life, you have never gone too far that God will not forgive you,
Right.
that God will not love you anymore. You cannot keep Christ from loving you, no matter how hard you try. And and that's what a lot of people feel like, that they've just done too bad of things in their life that Christ would or God would never accept them. And all we got to do is go back and look at our story of Paul that we've talked about in here. He was a murderer of God's people, and so he did these terrible things, and now he's winning souls. The greatest soul winner probably in history was Paul. But Christ never stopped loving him, and just like he would never stop loving us. And it doesn't matter how far you run away from Christ, if you're ready to come back to him, he's always right there waiting on you.
Yeah.
That's and you can't get away from him. But there is a limit to how long that's going to last, because all of us are limited by our time here on earth, and that decision has to be made by then before we leave this earth.
Yeah, it really does. And when it's talking about it will pass away, it's really talking about God's kingdom.
Right.
And when all that won't be necessary anymore, we won't need to know what the future is, because we will be in the
we'll
future.
be the future, yeah.
But you're talking about God's love and God's discipline. Probably one of the best examples I've seen of that is my wife. I was at work all day as the kids were growing up, and so she was in charge of and would take care of most of the discipline with our children. And she would discipline them. And after she was done with that, she would always set them down and say, "Do you understand what you did wrong? Do you know why I disciplined you?" And she would always end it with, "Because I love you."
Right.
And that's what God does for us.
Yeah.
That was a good reflection of God's love to our children through my wife, because she did an excellent job with that.
Yeah, and one last thought I have is the fact that we just talked about these spiritual gifts are going to fade away one day. Love will never
Right.
come to the point where it's unnecessary or not needed anymore.
Lives on forever.
Right.
All right, let's go to verses 9 and 10. "For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when completeness comes, what is in part disappears." So these two verses here, Coach, verses 9 and 10, take a deeper dive in examining why spiritual gifts are of lesser value than the imperatives to love.
Yeah, right. And I really believe that he's speaking of future time
Right.
here. For he says, what we know right now is in part. We don't know everything. God has not revealed everything to us. And we will not know all those things until we get to heaven. That's the thing when he says we only know things in part. We don't know the whole story, so to speak, although we like to think we do. And oftentimes he says we prophesy in part. And that's the idea, why we have people setting dates for when Christ is coming back, and they prophesy that this is going to happen, so people think that they know, but they really don't. Now you and I, of course, spent 17 weeks going through the book of Revelation, and all of that time we did not prophesy anything. We just had people look at the things, the signs that were, and all we would say is everything points to this time. Yep. We don't know when, but there are people that, especially when they try to set dates and so forth, just get themselves in trouble. So, but now he's saying that when completeness comes, well, completeness is not going to come until Christ comes back. Yeah. And when completeness comes, what was in part and what we didn't know, we're going to know. It's going to be unveiled to us in Christ's timing and in the future, and we will know him unlike no one has ever known him. So that to me, that is such an exciting thing to think about. We're going to actually be able to talk to him and know him and see him face to face, and realize that all those things that we thought about him, we probably were crazy thinking about some things, and others we just never got to really know him as well as he wanted to know us.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to come back in completeness. So I think that is a future time we're talking about here.
Because he knows us completely.
Sure.
But we don't know him
Right.
completely, because we have that sin barrier that keeps us,
Right.
it doesn't allow us from doing that. And any knowledge that is given to us on this side of heaven really is just a small slice of what really exists out
Right.
there. And so is prophecy. It only gives us a little tiny peek through a window of what's really out there. And again, once God's kingdom arrives, which you and I talked about in the book of Revelation, we will see it clearly
Right.
at that time.
Right.
And that takes us to verse 11, and it says this: "When I was a child, I talked like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me." So it would be possible to read this verse as a rebuke to the Christians in Corinth, who have failed to put away the childish things and weren't really living like adults.
Right. And that's what he's saying. It's, this is fairly easy to understand when you think about it. When we were children, there were certain things that were important to us, but as we grew and got older, we found out those things weren't very important at all.
Right.
And still aren't. And so he says, when I was a child, I talked as a child, I thought as a child, I reasoned like a child. So these are, talking about younger, people, children, and we thought, of course, that we knew everything at that age, which we didn't. But it says, when I became a man, I put away the childish things, and the childish things that he puts away are the little petty things that we've been talking about here. Things that I used to get angry about. There's much more important things now to worry about,
yeah,
and to think about than what somebody said to me or about me or whatever, or did to me. And this is where the Holy Spirit helps us overcome things like that. And we become more mature when we learn to depend on the Holy Spirit to help us through those kind of situations. But, that's the kind of thing that he's saying here, I believe. And we all need to do that, because as we start down our Christian life, when we're a young Christian, the Bible even talks about young Christians should be given milk to start with, meaning the easy things to digest. You don't start out in the book of Revelation with young Christians, trying to tell them all these things. You start in the Gospels,
right.
And teach them about Christ. And as they become more and more grounded in their beliefs, then you start adding the meat and the solid food to their diet, and they grow more and stronger. And then they start to understand this, what the childish things that they thought were and how they reacted to them and so forth. And then they become more mature adults, and they enter in a time where, the things, like I said, they learn to handle really, really tough situations with the help of Christ and the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, we're talking about spiritual gifts, and that's really what he's talking about here in verse 11, how they were misusing those spiritual gifts and acting like children with them and trying to draw attentions to themselves. And you think about what is the purpose of a spiritual gift, Coach? And that really is for us all to build each other up. That's the only purpose of it, to build each other up, to build up the church, and really to grow us up and to mature, like he's talking about here.
Right.
And so this passage shows that eventually the church will mature to the point that we reach the fullness of Christ. And you and I both know that's not going to happen until Jesus comes back and the kingdom of God is ushered in. But the gifts are needed to keep the process going until he comes. And then they'll be no longer needed, like you talked about. But interesting thought here too, Coach, on this verse 11. takes us to this other question about what does it mean to put childish things behind us? Now, you kind of unpack that a little bit there.
Yeah, right. Basically it means just kind of what you were talking about there too. It's putting away the things that you thought, did, and how you reacted when you were a young Christian, just learning about Christ and learning about this, and and you start thinking as you get older and you start getting more mature and you start learning about what the Bible says and all the things about the Bible. And the thing that, you and I both talked about this, how when you learn the Bible from cover to cover, not that we know all of it, but just to see how it all fits is amazing. And that you have to have a certain development of maturity to be able to see that and to understand it. From the book of Genesis all the way through the book of Revelation, it's just like a fantastic story that you're a part of, and that's the idea of putting behind the childish things that aren't important, like they were talking about here, the spiritual gifts, where last week they were talking about, believing you had to be baptized to be saved, and putting the things that cause probably 90% of the church problems are caused by those little things that as an adult Christian, we should be putting away. And those kind of things cause just trouble and often division in churches. So that's what he's trying to tell them here. As you mature, you start seeing the important things through God's eyes or through God's, his guidance. You start looking for the important things.
Yeah, it's talking about children here. When a child speaks like a child, it's because that's what's in their mind.
Yeah.
It's coming out.
Yeah.
A child is often dominated by their emotional mind rather than their rational mind. They can't do it. They're not capable of it. But it seems that some childish things just fall away as we grow up. They just kind of go away. We don't have to make an intentional decision to get rid of them or grow out of them. We lose interest in and are even put off and possibly even embarrassed, Coach, by some of our behaviors when we were teens.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's some things that we all did when we were younger we'd rather probably just not talk about.
Right, exactly.
Although our parents could remind us for sure. But some things about our childish character don't fall away on their own. And they have to be intentionally dealt with and put off of us. Mm-hmm. And that's what Paul's talking about here. Some childish things seem to cling to us like Velcro, and removing them requires the Holy Spirit to do it. Mm-hmm. It's really a tough project. Most of us recognize, here's what I think is really interesting. Most people recognize childish behavior in other people, but they fail to recognize it in their own life because they're self-focused. Yeah. You think about what childish behavior looks like. Well, first of all, they feel like it's all about me. It's about my needs. It's about my desires. It's about my image. Mm-hmm. Bullying. I mean, you could go on and on. Throwing tantrums when you don't get your way. Yeah. And you see that in churches, Coach. Mm-hmm. Not just the playground at school. No. You see it in churches.
It takes some people just a little longer to mature than it does others.
But here, the reason Paul is talking about all this, because these are symptoms of the church in Corinth. Mm-hmm. These very things are going on just at an adult scale. Right. But if you were to take away what they were actually pontificating about, so to speak, it's like a playground. Right. It's like kids saying, "Oh, you took my ball," Anyway, but I believe it's fair to conclude that putting away childish things and thinking naturally or maturely comes from a renewed mind. Mm-hmm. That's the key, is having a renewed mind, one that thinks God's thoughts and thinks and speaks God's thoughts. Right. And that takes us to verse 12. For now we see only a reflection as in a mirror, then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. So we should not equate, he's talking about a mirror here, Coach. We shouldn't look at that like we see the mirror in the bathroom. That's not what he's talking about here.
No, when you looked in those mirrors, you weren't very proud of what you saw. But that's because most of the mirrors were simply shiny surfaces, often that made out of metal at that time, where they would check out what the reflection was, and of course it was dim and blurry and oftentimes distorted. So no, what he's trying to say here is that, again, I still feel this is pointing toward the future, and he's saying that we only see a reflection now that's a very dim reflection of what's really the story and how it's really going to be. And one of these days we're going to see, and he uses the words face to face, and I believe that is direct reference to Jesus Christ. And we're going to see face to face with Jesus. And he says, now I know in part. I know part of the story, but I'm not going to see it fully until that happens, until I come face to face with Christ. And I know then that I will be known fully as I am now, and I will also be able to know Christ and all the wonderful things that are waiting in heaven.
Yeah, some scholars believe here, Coach, that Paul's suggesting that he had in mind Corinth's famous bronze mirrors that they had, known for their imperfect reflections. And when you think about that, the reflection was limited to what truly was looking at it. And that's what he's saying here. It's like the reflection you see, it's limited. There's going to be a time when you see it all for really what it is.
Right.
And that's what he's talking about in a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
And that takes us to the last verse here. And Coach, this is going to take us to one of the most famous verses and most used verses in the entire Bible. And it's talking about the greatest of these is love here in verse 13. And it says, and now these three remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. And that there's a great way to end this. Faith, hope, and love form a trio, Coach, that sums up the crucial elements that should be at the heart of Christian living.
Right, and of course this is the verse that everybody remembers out of our love chapter, as we call it sometimes, and this is what is used. In fact, I've had the privilege to perform some weddings, and this is what I always come back to here, as far as, because I think this is the key to everything, whether it's a marriage or just a life in general, if you want to live the Christian life. And he says these three remain, faith, hope, and love. And again, we talked about a lot of the so-called spiritual gifts are going to cease.
Yep.
There's no reason to have them anymore. But these are kind of also put in order. You got to have faith first. That has to come first. And then faith gives you hope.
Right.
If we have the faith that we've been talking about, and we try to talk about every week here, if someone accepts through faith the things that we're saying here about accepting Christ, then their hope increases, because they now have a hope of something that's real, that they can really hang their hat on, so to speak. And that's the fact, knowing that Jesus Christ died for them, that he was willing to give up his own life to save theirs. And, if someone loves me that much, that really shows that Christ went far beyond where anyone else would have gone for me, And so it gives us hope that what God says in his word is true, including that what's left out there, what's beyond this world is indescribable. And we can't even imagine what it's like. But then he says, and then the last one is love, and he's trying to say that here comes our love debt again. It's still not over. The love is still going to be there even in eternity. It's just that we'll be able to express love personally with the one who died for us. And so that's the faith and the hope and the love. But he says the greatest of these is love. And because it is, as we said, it lasts forever. True love does. So, love is the primary attribute of God.
Yeah.
That's what he's known for. That's why we will just eternally be in love with God at the times that we're there, being able to fellowship with him. And we're going to know it, love unlike we've ever known it. So that's why he's trying to say here that we see a little bit of that here on earth, but as we get mature and as we start turning it to where we're trying to make sure we love our neighbor as ourselves, that we love even strangers, it means more to us, and we're going to understand even better when we get to heaven.
I think it's pretty neat here the way Paul sets this up, because he's saying, look, faith, hope, and love are greater than the spiritual gifts.
Right.
Here's why he said that. Faith and hope are important, but the greatest of these is love. Mm-hmm. Here's why this is so important. The gifts, the spiritual gifts that he's talking about, if they are applied with love, without love, they're meaningless.
Right.
And they're not only meaningless, they can be destructive. Mm-hmm. So that's why all of a sudden love is prominent. Love is the main issue here. And again, we're not talking about a love that humans created. Mm-hmm. We're talking about an agape love that flows directly from God himself.
Right.
And that takes us to our thought to remember. Love remains the primary form of ID for the follower of Jesus. And Coach, could you take that thought to remember? Give us some parting shots here as we wrap it up here today.
Well, yeah, again, and the love that we're talking about, like I said, first thing is if you don't know Jesus Christ, you don't know that love. And you can't show that love to other people because you don't understand it.
Right.
So first thing you need to think about getting your life right with Christ, and because he's already shown you his love for you, all you have to do is accept it, and he will help you carry you the rest of the way. But the idea here too is in love, it's when we think about love, it's going beyond and above what we were expected to do for somebody. And your motive for it is pure. You're doing it to make them better. It's not so you can get something out of it for yourself. This is you're giving love to other people to help them in whatever situations they might be into. And then, some of the best love showing that there is when someone will give something to a person without them knowing who it is. That's the kind of love that God gives, right. And we know that the love that we show each other is far different from as Christians, or should be, than what you see out there in the world. And that's why some people are so discouraged right now, is because the love they see is not the kind of love that gives them any satisfaction.
Well, we started this whole segment, Coach, with the thought of when you hear the word love, what do you think of? Mm-hmm. And, the Bible has its definition of what love is, and the world has its definition of what love is. And I think these two passages of Scripture have clearly defined what agape love is, right. What God's love truly is. And the only way you can ever experience that, the only way you could ever give it or really receive it is to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior.
Right.
If you have any questions about that, we would love to have a conversation with you. This is Pine Grove Baptist Church in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and you should see the contact information on the screen. Or if you have any questions about anything we've talked about in today's segment or any other segment prior to this, we would love to hear from you. For those of you who watch week to week, maybe this is your very first time. We would encourage you to share this message with your contacts out on whatever social media platform it is that you subscribe to. It just gets the word out. We're also out on podcast platforms, so you can enjoy that feature as well. We thank each one of you for making us part of your day. We don't take it for granted, and we do see it as a very, very dear privilege. Next week, the title of our study is Freedom from the World, and we're going to be in the book of Colossians, Coach, looking at chapter 2. So until next time, this is Mike Cornell along with Coach Ron Lathey and our production team, Andy and Courtney Holbrook, wishing everybody have a blessed week, and we hope to see you real soon.